Hello, and welcome to Flipping the Table. Today's episode is a special episode because it is our 100th podcast since 2019. Michael speaks to you solo today. He shares why he remains an optimist about the food system and civilization, despite the fact that 2023 is the hottest year ever in human history, and we are constantly witnessing and experiencing extreme weather events, political chaos, and human conflicts. Here is evidence for believing that humans will survive and thrive into the future because of the work of the Good Food Movement. Enjoy the show.
Hello. So today I'm without a guest, but I have some thoughts I want to share about the Good Food Movement on this, our 100th episode of Flipping the Table. Over 5 years, I've had what are, for me, and I hope you too, enlightening conversations with 90 committed individuals who are actively working to improve our world. Some of them I've featured more than once because they're so compelling, thoughtful, and active in critical ways, even when not directly involved in changing the food system. It's these conversations, my work at Roots of Change and with our allies, and my constant consumption of news and information about food and agriculture that shape my views. So as I look back over the last 30 years in the field, I am convinced that I have seen more advances or victories since 2019 than in all the years preceding it. This is why I remain an optimist about our future. The transformation sought is underway and at an accelerating pace. I believe that where food systems go, all systems underlying civilization will eventually go too, because the food system is the base system for any human society. In fact, a food system is the basis for the existence of any and all living species, whether bacteria or human. All species organize themselves to maximize their access to sustenance. I believe this so deeply, I'm writing a book about it. But more on that another time. The pattern of our food system has greatly shaped other systems utilized. Think about energy, water, medical, economic, and governance systems. All are deeply connected and influenced in their structures and services by the food system. Among the greatest focal points of the healthcare system is treatment of type 2 diabetes, a diet-related disease. 80% of fresh water is delivered to agriculture. The food system alone counts for 30% of all the energy humans consume in a year. This is because fossil fuel is the power source behind most fertilizer and all the machinery in the field, in the processing plants and distribution centers. And oil is a key ingredient in the many chemicals used in agriculture. Then there is governance. The Farm Bill's largest component is nutrition benefits. It's about $75 billion a year. This is considered mandatory spending built into the nation's annual budget. And we must not forget, many of the Constitution's framers and 8 of the nation's first 12 presidents were made wealthy by agriculture and enslaved thousands of Africans. They encoded in our social structure and economy a mindset that remains largely intact within the nation. It is the idea of exploiting the resources and labor for maximum profit above all else. Luckily, that mindset is being powerfully challenged and is slowly giving way to a new view in the food system, one that says that food is the foundation of human and ecological health, and it must be made healthy, resilient, and just to protect and enhance humanity's future. I want to share the evidence I see that the food system is really changing. I'll begin with the fact that agriculture, that is the production of food and fiber from the land, is embracing the complexity of nature and the need for ecological and economic diversity and respect and care for the workforce. I'll go further and say that despite the hateful and often violent resistance from those who want to look back to a simpler time when white supremacy and patriarchy were acceptable, the societal complexity and diversity that comes with economic, racial, ethnic, and gender equality is slowly being embraced by the mainstream of a large portion of this nation. And that trend can be found in food system changes made by both the public and private sectors. Some simple examples of more justice in food systems are that in the last 5 years, farm workers have gained access to overtime and higher minimum wages here in California, something long denied. Some of you may have recently seen that the meat processing corporations in the Midwest got busted and fined for violating child labor laws. Here in California, farm labor contractors and those who hire them are getting hammered for violating worker rights to lodge complaints of abuse, and at the same time, the ag industry in places like Ventura and Sonoma County are protecting workers from lost wages due to heat, smoke, and other extreme disruptions. I see more empathy for the plight of workers emerging, particularly in California. Although government is among the hardest institutions to change, the momentum in policy victories is increasing across the nation related to food access. We now have hundreds of millions in funding for nutrition incentives, school food, food banks, and more. Efforts to expand local and regional infrastructure improvements, reductions in toxic use and exposure, and organic and regenerative farming are all being resourced by improvement in policy. When it comes to economic diversification and infrastructure, interesting things are certainly underway. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack stated in 2021 that the nation has gone too far in pursuing efficiency by concentration of food processing, and he and the nation are committed to creating food supply chain resilience by investing in diverse scales of processing plants to aid mid- and small-scale producers, providing them better access to markets and revenue. Then, in January of this year, before the Senate Agriculture Committee that's beginning work on the new Farm Bill, Vilsack declared that USDA is dedicated to transformation of the food system by increasing diversity of scales, expanding climate-smart agriculture, and bringing more equity for Black, brown, and indigenous farmers and ranchers. His words are backed by action. You can see it in local, state, and federal governments and how they're investing in food system resilience in ways not seen for nearly 100 years. Since the pandemic, the federal government has invested approximately $100 billion in additional funding into the USDA beyond the 2018 Farm Bill baseline appropriation. A bit of research indicated the following flows. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, brought $49.5 billion to USDA. The American Rescue Plan brought about $40 billion, and the Inflation Reduction Act brought $19.5 billion. So much of that was for food security enhancement through SNAP and other nutrition benefit programs, including urban agriculture, but a large portion has flowed to local and regional food system infrastructure and conservation programs. This includes the $3.1 billion flowing to the 41 climate-smart commodities partnership projects designed to move our agricultural producers into a new paradigm aiming for soil building, carbon capture, water capture and efficiency, and corollary ecosystem services. You can read about Roots of Change's participation in one of these grants in our August 2023 newsletter. ARP Acts also include direct grants to cities, counties, and states, and an impactful portion of those funds have been aimed at local and regional food systems. For example, in LA County, at least $40 million from those two sources have flowed to low-income families as nutrition benefits or incentives for purchasing fresh fruits and vegetables from small farmers selling through farmers markets in the county. Similar programs are found across the nation. A quick review of the cities that now possess urban agriculture offices or the equivalent is impressive. In a simple 5-minute Google search, I found them in San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. Like California, many states, including Texas and New York, have state-funded urban agriculture programs. And the USDA's urban agriculture programs, combined with these local and state efforts, are essential to increasing the ubiquity of robust urban agriculture sites. And this is important. By 2021, 20 of the nation's states had enacted some kind of healthy soils program like California's done. Between federal and state investments, these incentive payments to farmers and ranchers to build healthy soil is certainly over $3.2 billion and growing. Many will say that, oh, well, this is just the left coast, California. And it's true, but this state is a bellwether. As I've highlighted in past episodes, the legislature, with backing from Governor Newsom, has invested $3 billion in healthy and resilient food systems over the last 2 state budgets. Today, the legislature is now considering a request for nearly $4 billion in bond funding for farm worker housing, healthy food access, infrastructure, and climate-smart farming. The Food and Farm Resilience Coalition, of which Roots of Change is a part, seeks to have that bond request placed before the voters in 2024. So far, the legislature is saying yes, and with no opposition from the governor. If voters pass the bond, it will be more of an indication of what I see happening in the wider culture of the nation as reflected in the market. My optimism is buoyed by the fact that the marketplace includes increasing numbers of awakened consumers. They are helping to drive change. Back in '88, when I first became engaged in all this, colleagues and I, along with farmers and ranchers across the spectrum, complained that consumers knew almost nothing about agriculture or the food system, except that they wanted food to be cheap and fast. So we were all calling for more agriculture and food literacy. Since then, the slow food movement, the organic movement, the healthy food movement, and the food justice movement, along with increased attention from the news media and entertainment industry, have fostered and are shaping the collective consciousness of our nation and the industrialized world about food and farming. There are multiple books, documentaries, feature films, and news stories every day about farms, ranches, and the planet. Think about the award-winning documentary film The Biggest Little Farm from 2018, or last year's The Menu with Ralph Fiennes, or the Taylor Sheridan series Yellowstone, which is finding a welcome alignment between conservative ranchers and progressives, calling for economic justice and environmental stewardship. And this year, a new film, Common Ground, is coming about, which will talk all about regenerative farming. Big companies see this entertainment and media coverage and consumer demand and are requiring their largest farms and ranch suppliers to embrace environmental farming and better labor practices. The critical development here is that industrial food and manufacturing corporations like Unilever or Danone, General Mills, and Mars, to name only a few, want their agricultural producers to become very acute observers of the biology in the fields and livestock facilities. They want deeper data gathering and metric tracking about what is happening on the farms. This careful and precise engagement provides the insights that farmers and ranchers need to align or work with nature. I know from seeing it with my own eyes that our farmers and ranchers can become solutions to ecological, climate, and labor challenges. They do it when they combine a dose of empathy with an ability to see their land in the way indigenous people have done for millennia. Their efforts are hugely enhanced when they use modern social and physical sciences to extend perception of what the land and people need at any given moment to regenerate resources while simultaneously feeding all the human, plant, fungal, and animal species dependent on and contributing back to that land. Our farmers and ranchers become part of a virtuous cycle that enhances life when they do these things, and more are doing it. And an entire industry of science and tech-based enterprises are supporting this transition within agriculture. I invite you to go to Google and type in Pasture Map or Snaplands, Indigo Ag, or Point Blue Conservation Science, and you will see what I mean. Then there are the farm-to-table restaurants, which promote local and regional farmers and ranchers who demonstrate such care for the land and people. These types of restaurants are everywhere now. You find them in big cities and even small towns, in urban, suburban, and rural settings. Local and regionally owned grocers distinguish themselves by promoting their local sourcing. We recently heard at our Regional Regenerative Meat Summit in Sacramento that one of UCLA's most popular on-campus restaurants is one that focuses on local, healthy, and regenerative ingredients. Students on campuses all over the world are demanding products that don't harm workers, the climate and environment, and contribute to good health. I just spoke yesterday with George, a recent graduate in business from the University of Washington. He wants to move into a career related to regenerative agriculture because he wants to address climate change, which is obviously the biggest threat to his future. Grass-fed meat is the fastest growing segment of the beef industry, which is a sector that is actually contracting in the US and Western Europe. Grass-fed is healthier for your body and the planet, and people are catching on to this. We also know that the natural food sector continues to expand faster than conventional grocery. Also, and this is very interesting and encouraging to me because it reveals real market sophistication. The mythologies around alternative and cell-grown meats are being exposed and discussed. Their truly industrial nature and their separation from the natural systems are being questioned, and all that venture capital money invested in the alternate meat sector is looking more and more like a bad bet. So consumers and those who inform them are really awakening to the nuances required to fuel expansion of a healthy and resilient food system by driving demand. That demand, partially motivated by increasing climate impacts and long-standing health concerns, is now shaping the emerging generation of farmers and ranchers who are plotting their future. Our regenerative meat work reveals it clearly. Those taking over the multi-generational ranches involved are the majority of the participants we work with. So check out our report on the June meeting we just had. You'll see it reflected in what we heard from the 50 ranchers in the room. And of course, being on the land, farmers and ranchers are seeing the impacts of climate change more intimately than most people who live in urban settings. The heat, drought, fire, flood, tornadoes, hurricanes, all these extreme events caused by climate disruption are inspiring a new approach for many of those who produce our food. We are in a moment much like the extreme drought and wind that led to the Dust Bowl. It's a moment of flux that is pointing to the long-held principles and practices called for by those in the good food movement. So I put my faith in the human desire to survive and thrive. I believe as the world continues to heat, the momentum for change will accelerate. I believe we will make the transition to a good food system, and it will influence all the other systems beneath civilization. I see the evidence emerging.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our sponsors, the Ladybug Foundation, Dan and Quincy Imhoff, Beth and Mark Wyatt, Cindy Daniel, and Doug Lipton. Roots of Change is a program of the Public Health Institute.